Coca-Cola is the world's most popular soda brand, even beating the likes of Pepsi and Dr. Pepper. It also remains the third largest soft drink corporation in the world by revenue, bringing in over $43 billion of revenue in 2022 alone. Aside from owning their flagship brand being Coca-Cola, the company also owns brands such as Sprite, Fanta, and Dasani. Not only are they one of the world's most successful corporations, but also one of the oldest, being founded in 1892 by Asa Griggs Candler. Candler founded what would become a titan in the business industry, one with deep and rich history. Today we'll explore that history and learn how the Coca-Cola Company grew into what it is today. The beloved soft drinks history began 6 years before the company's founding. In a small pharmacy in Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. John S. Pemberton created what was the first Coca-Cola. He invented a flavored syrup at home and brought it to his pharmacy, where he combined it with carbonated water to create the drink. Soon after, the drink became a hit. It was a new drink unlike anything anyone was used to at the time, and therefore the people who sampled it began to ask for more. The drink was unnamed at first, but soon after, Dr. Pemberton's bookkeeper gave the drink the name Coca-Cola, and created the famous bottle design that each bottle bared, which continues to be used to this day. His name was Frank M. Robinson, and without him the drink might have not become the staple that it is today, or it would have at least been very different. The popularity of Coca-Cola grew around Atlanta, with Pemberton selling the syrup to other local pharmacies and creating advertisements in the newspapers for people to try the drink, offering a coupon. Soon after the growth and popularity of Coca-Cola, Pemberton sold his shares in his business to different individuals before his death. Asa Griggs Candler became the majority shareholder in this new enterprise. Under his leadership, he organized the founding of the Coca-Cola Company and grew the sale of Coca-Cola to other cities across the U.S. Soon after, another invention grew Coca-Cola's dominating market share, the use of bottles to transport the beverage. In 1894, Joseph Biedenharn added bottling machinery to his soda fountain in Mississippi, becoming the first person to bottle Coca-Cola. This later led to 3 individuals in Chattanooga to buy out the bottling rights from Asa Candler for a grand total of $1. Yes, Benjamin Thomas, Joseph Whitehead, and John Lupton created what would become the worldwide bottling distribution system for Coca-Cola for just $1. This didn't stop Asa Candler, who at this point controlled every share in the company, from growing Coca-Cola to a worldwide brand. In 1900, Coca-Cola was introduced to its second foreign market after Canada, being Cuba. The Cuba Libre was invented following this introduction, which is also known as the popular alcoholic beverage rum and coke. 2 years later, the competitor Coca-Cola was launched, which infused their cola with cocaine, often being confused with the actual Coca-Cola Company, as many still believe that the drink Coke had cocaine in it to get people addicted. The one ingredient that Coca-Cola did have too much of in it was caffeine. This prompted Congress to pass the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. This act forced the company to lower the amount of caffeine in the drink, which Coca-Cola failed to appeal. Fast forward to 1915, and the famous glass bottle design of Coca-Cola was released. This became the brand's signature look and is often what people think about when the mention of Coca-Cola is made. The bottle is still used to this day, with modifications made to it, making it plastic or glass when purchased in the store. You can also see the glass bottle when viewing advertisements for the company, such as the famous polar bear advertisements that began appearing in 1922. A couple years after their bottle was invented, Coca-Cola became a public company in 1919. Ernest Woodruff purchased the company for $25 million. Using his trust company of Georgia, he made the company go public, initially selling at $40 a share, which equals to about $743 today. The share price of Coca-Cola would grow even higher in 1920 as Prohibition was signed into law. Coca-Cola became one of the most popular drinks of this time, as alcohol was not allowed to be legally sold. This skyrocketed the company's performance during the Roaring Twenties and even contributed to the company investing in a radio show called the Coca-Cola Hour in 1927. However, soon after came the Great Depression, and many didn't have the ability to purchase Coca-Cola, leaving the company almost dead in the water. They continued to advertise, however, which led to ever-increased customer loyalty, which boosted their popularity coming out of the Depression. Following the company's increased popularity, they released their first new brand, Fanta, in Germany in 1940. The United States had placed a trade embargo on Germany, and therefore Coca-Cola could not send many of their ingredients to German factories. This led Max Keith, a manager at one of these factories, to pull together a new drink to keep the factory operating. He created Fanta, using apple fiber from lollipops and whey from the cheesemakers to create the new soft drink. This became a popular drink in Germany, and after the war, Fanta became an increasingly popular drink around the world. After the United States entered World War II, Coca-Cola marketed themselves as a patriotic brand and supplied their drinks to the troops across the world. This led to countries in Asia and Europe to experience their first drinks of Coke, which grew the company's market share in foreign markets, otherwise known as Coca colonization. By 1950, Coca-Cola had a monopoly on soft drinks, unparalleled to any other brand in the world, grabbing up 60% of the market share in the US. In the 1960s, the company saw exemplary growth and several acquisitions. First, by purchasing the Minute Maid Company in 1960, which brought in brands like the aforementioned Lemonade and High C, along with other popular juice brands. Then by launching Sprite in 1961 as a way to compete with the already popular 7-Up. 2 years later, Tab was launched by the company, introducing a diet soda to their line. This would be one of their more popular drinks until Diet Coke was created in 1982. With declining sales leading into the early 2000s, Tab was discontinued in 2020. Then, in 1966, Coca-Cola's line of Fresca was launched to the public. Following that, Mr. Pibb was created in 1972 to compete with Dr. Pepper. It's safe to say that Coca-Cola saw extreme growth in this time period following World War II. Household brands that have been beloved by people around the world for decades, all created within the span of 11 years, starting with Sprite. In 1979, the company was finally introduced to the Soviet Union. While Pepsi was already being sold in the country since 1973, Coca-Cola was not allowed to do so until they signed on to be a major sponsor of the Moscow Olympics. Due to this, the Soviet government allowed Coke products to be shipped into the country. Once they started arriving, they never stopped, as Russians became huge fans of the product. As the company entered the 1980s, they appointed a new chief executive officer, Roberto Goizueta. Goizueta had fled from Cuba after Fidel Castro took over the government. He had previously studied at Yale University, but returned to Cuba upon graduating. He came to the U.S. with a job lined up at the Coca-Cola Company, and climbed up the corporate ladder, eventually reaching CEO. He had already rose to prominence as the youngest VP in the history of the company, being promoted at just 35 years old. But now, as CEO, he strong-headed his desire to turn Coca-Cola into a titan of industry. He consolidated the amount of bottlers that the company worked with, introduced several new brands to the company's portfolio, like Diet Coke and Cherry Coke, and introduced Coca-Cola to a new international market. Over his 16-year tenure, Goizueta had grown the company's market value from $4 billion in 1981 to over $145 billion in 1997. As a part of his efforts, Coca-Cola purchased Columbia Pictures for $692 million in 1982. This allowed the company to begin appearing in motion pictures without having to pay large amounts for product placement. This only grew the notoriety of the brand and the popular culture that each can represented. There would be one smear on Goizueta's record, however. As the Cola Wars raged on between Coca-Cola and Pepsi, Coke began testing new products and recipes. This culminated in the release of New Coke, a replacement for the original Coca-Cola with a different formula. New Coke was widely regarded as Coca-Cola's worst drink, and it only lasted 77 days on grocery store shelves before being removed and replaced with the original version. It wasn't all bad, however. While the company had lost millions in research and development and advertisement for the new product, they gained more in free advertisement, allowing for them to remain the #1 beverage product in the country. So much so that in 1988, the infamous Warren Buffett made his $1.3 billion investment into the brand, which he still holds today. Going into the 1990s, Coca-Cola and Roberto Goizueta had their sights on expansion into Asian markets. They introduced their brand into two of the largest markets in the world, India and China. By acquiring the brand Thumbs Up, Coca-Cola was able to reintroduce themselves into the Indian market. In China, after years of tight regulations from the Chinese government, Coca-Cola was finally able to sell their products in the country, eventually becoming one of their largest markets to this day. We also saw the creation of the World of Coca-Cola, the company's museum in Atlanta, Georgia. In the World of Coke, guests can walk through the history of the company, from the creation of the formula of the first Coke to its expanding portfolio of brands. Guests can also try Coke from around the world, offering different flavors from each continent. I've been there before, and trust me, after trying a couple of drinks, they all just begin to taste the same. Sadly, in 1997, Roberto Goizueta passed away from lung cancer, and the search was on for a new CEO that could continue the growth that Goizueta had left behind. Unfortunately, since Goizueta, no CEO at the Coca-Cola Company has remained on the position as long as he had. The board chose Douglas Ivester as their new CEO, but he only remained on for 3 years, then followed by Douglas Daft for only another 4 years. Safe to say, with the quick changing of the top position, the Coca-Cola Company hadn't experienced much expansion in this time period, aside from the acquisition of Glacéau, a company that owned the popular brands of Smart Water and Vitamin Water. We don't see the return of Coca-Cola's global expansion until the 2010s. With the popular ad Share a Coke, Coca-Cola returns once again to the popular culture stage. This became one of the company's most renowned ad campaigns and grew sales, adding 1.25 million consumers to the brand according to Market Research Society. Throughout the 2010s, we see the growth of Coca-Cola into more Asian markets, including Myanmar. The company also continued their series of acquisitions, purchasing Monster's non-energy drink brands such as Peace Tea and Hanson's in 2015, Topo Chico in 2017, and Costa Coffee in 2018. In 2020, as the pandemic threatened the company's sales, Coca-Cola announced that it would cut over 200 of its smaller brands. This was in an effort to focus more on the larger and more profitable brands. But still, the company cut over half of its beverage portfolio due to the decline in sales. Which leads us to today. The Coca-Cola Company remains one of the world's most prominent brands. With its long and extensive history, Coca-Cola has rooted itself into American pop culture and entertainment, which allowed for unparalleled growth and acquisitions. Spearheaded by the leadership of Goizueta, Coca-Cola became a household brand, not only in the US, but also around the world. While Coca-Cola has lost some of its ambition after the death of Goizueta, they still retain their growth in sales year after year. Going into the future, the company hopes to retain the sense of nostalgia around their products. As they continue to grow, their history remains a part of them every step of the way, showing just how important corporate history really is. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and join me as I unpack more corporate history from companies all around the world.